Hello everyone and welcome to the second part of the video about how to use HLOD system in our plugin. In the last video we talked about the importing process of assets. And if you did not watch that video, please first watch that video and then come here. If you remember from the last video, we have created an octree for calculating LODs of our assets. This is my octree script and here are my LOD distances. For example here, if the camera distance to the object is less than 30 meters, the object is considered to be LOD 0, between 30 to 60 meter, it is LOD 1 and so on. This setting here is one of the most important settings which will affect your game performance. But what number is a set of good number here? Well, I cannot recommend anything to you. It depends on your game. It depends on how much dense is your word is, how big is that, and what platform are you targeting. I believe you need a little bit of practice and try and error to understand what the best number is for you. Now, as I told you before, in our system, you can create your scene, whether it is house or anything else, and then not put that scene into an ordinary pack scene resource that Godot use. Instead, bake it into another resource which is called HLOD resource. So to do that, you need first to create a baker scene. To create a new baker scene, first click on the plus button and then create a new baker scene. Now here I just add a filter to my asset table so I can see only mesh assets. Now here in Baker scene, I just adding a new mesh. This mesh has multiple LOD. One way to see other LOD of this mesh is to move the editor camera. Another way is to activate Force LOD checkbox. By doing that, you can see how your scene will look like in different LOD. Now if I just activate Show Boundary checkbox, you can see also the boundary of the current LOD will appear. For example, right now every camera position which is inside this box is considered LOD 0. Now if I change this LOD number, I will have two boundary boxes. And this means every camera position between two boxes are considered LOD 1. And if you change that to LOD 2, this means every camera position between these two boxes are considered as LOD 2 and so on. Alright. Now please pay attention to this part because knowing this stuff is essential to work with our system. In HLOD system, we don't calculate LOD for each item separately. Instead, we group some close object together and then we calculate LOD for all of them at the same time. The main reason is performance. In our open world game, we can have millions of objects. If we group some object together and calculate their LOD, it is much better than calculating for each specific object. And if those objects are close together enough, this does not matter. Now let me show you what I mean by an example. In this baker scene right now I have one well mesh. Now if I add another well too, despite these wells having different position, all of their LOD is going to change at the same time. The important factor to calculating LOD is the camera distance to the baker root node, not to each individual object. So this is the boundary of LOD 0, and this means whatever you put inside this scene should be inside this boundary. Even it should have a good distance with this boundary so the player does not feel the LOD of the meshes is changing suddenly. For example, if I put another well mesh outside of this boundary, you can see despite I am close to it, it's showing the LOD 1 mesh. In case you design a house, you can do one trick. You can keep the same wall mesh for LOD 0 and LOD 1 so the player won't feel any change when the wall LOD change from LOD 1 to 0. But object inside that house can change their LOD. Now the question comes, what if I want to create a huge house or a huge scene? Don't worry, we have a solution for that. For this, we have two solutions right now. First is to create a sub baker. So these are my wells. Here I just add a new baker node. This is basically a sub baker. One thing about the sub baker is that you should not bake them. In future, we may remove this button. Baking the root baker will also bake them. Now I just move the sub baker node position to the position of the well which was outside of our boundary. And I just add the well as the child of this. Now this time, this well LOD is calculated based on the position of this sub baker. And if I activate the boundary of LOD 0 for each baker, you can see they are at the different positions. Also this time, if I get close to this well, you can see the LOD 0 of this well is showing. So this was the first method to solve this problem, but I don't recommend the first method in this case. You will understand why in a moment. Well, the second method works like this. I just create a baker node and I rename it well. After that, I just add a well here and I bake it. Now I open another baker scene. Here, if I change the asset filter to also show HLOD resource, you can see we have two wells down here. One of these well has HLOD watermark. Basically, this well is HLOD scene which we just baked, and the other one is just an asset. They look the same, also they have the same content, but internally they are a little bit different. Now here for the well which are close to the root baker, I add this asset well. But for those who are far away, I will add well which is HLOD scene. Now no matter at what position you put these wells, the OD works correctly. This method and previous method, internally both are the same thing. After baking, we will have a sub HLOD inside the main HLOD resource. But the advantage with this method is that you can reuse a well HLOD and save memory. So you can use this well HLOD in another scene too. And basically this will not get duplicated in memory at runtime. If you are building some specific thing only for one scene, which will never be used in other scene, then it is better to use sub-baker. So these two methods right now is working, but we are planning to add an automatic clustering algorithm to this, but this is for future. Alright, this was about how LOD works in our HLOD system. In the next video, I will talk about join mesh. Have a good time and see you later.